Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the November 28th, 2011 Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. Mrs. Jewell, could you call the roll for us, please?
Yes. Councilmember Coaston. Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel. Delavar.
Present.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Russell.
Here.
And Councilmember Morris.
Here.
I haven't heard anything from Molly or Jennifer, either one, so. Do we have anyone in the public that would like to address council on any items before we get started this evening?
Gail Burgess, 32917 Southeast Eagle Woods Drive. It would totally make my evening if people took some notes. I think that'd be great. My career, I have 2 degrees in the hard sciences, and I spent 20 years working in the sciences at the University of Washington Medical Center and Children's Hospital. Science has given me a really good living, and so I'm interested in anything science. And when I heard about the strategic planning project, my ears kind of pricked up. I thought, I wonder if it will be scientific. And I found out within a minute or so of the presentation that it wasn't. And because I was listening for it, I heard in 2 different workshops and in a council meeting that it was not a scientific study. I heard the mayor say that the city at this point hiring a firm to do a scientific survey would be cost prohibitive. I think I heard that because I was listening for it. And so when the article appeared in the Post-Record this last week, I was surprised that my knowledge base wasn't the same as somebody else's who was present in the room. So my first request is, I think because we all have different backgrounds, different agendas, different issues, we have different sets of ears, that when the strategic planning project is brought up for discussion or presentation, I think it would be helpful to spend a minute or 2 reiterating what this project is and what it is not, so that everyone shares the same information base, especially as you council members move forward to making decisions about how to use it or how to not use it. My second request would be, I haven't heard much discussion about how you would use a non-scientific survey. And I think that's a topic that there should be some research done on it. Perhaps an intern could start working on that, and then early on start thinking about it and discussing it so that this topic doesn't become an item for contention. So that's the first part. My last point is one that I don't want to cause offense, but I do want to read from the City of Washougal website. This has been up on the website for several months. The City of Washougal is embarking on a strategic planning effort to plan for the next 20 years. The project includes gathering citizen opinions on a variety of issues. Responses are appreciated, I'm going to use visual aids here, appreciated and essential to assist the city in formulating its future course. The project includes gathering citizen opinions on a variety of issues. This is an opportunity for the public to share ideas and participate in Washougal's future. Now, I've highlighted certain words. To me, those words, participation, appreciation, this is about communication. This is about establishing trust that the city is communicating to the citizens that it will respect what the citizens have to say. And I think this article, I don't know, it doesn't matter who's responsible for the headline, but the headline reads, "The council should ignore the strategic planning survey." And that disenfranchises this communication effort made by the city. I would ask the city council to consider issuing a statement to reaffirm the council's intention to appreciate and continue to listen and respect to what citizens have to say, and that you will be using this strategic planning survey in some manner in the future. I think finally, Mr. Delavar, I really love his thoughtfulness, and I think he raises some good questions. I think because of our backgrounds, he and I are looking at opposite ends of the same animal. But I think that kind of thoughtfulness, I appreciate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gail. Good evening, Larry.
Good evening, Council. My name is Larry Keister, Zitzelberger Road in Washougal. I'm amazed to hear that after close to a year of work, there was discussion that the strategic planning team's results may not be meaningful. At the beginning, the citizens and business owners were asked how they would like to see the city of Washougal look in the future. The questions were developed and presented to the City Council meeting for approval with all council members present. The council was involved in all the stages of the plan and development of the survey. The public was also encouraged to share their ideas at City Council meetings. There were questions asked of the team at the council meetings, and approval to continue was given. The concept was well thought out, focusing on a variety of views. Any question or survey dealing with numbers can be interpreted in different ways. The strategic planning team had 3 formal town hall meetings and 3 informal coffee gatherings to get citizens' input and to discuss each question and share their ideas. The team visited every business in Washougal to get the business perspective as to how they saw their business fit into Washougal's future. From these conversations, a better understanding of the city's future will be developed. These gatherings to discuss the ideas complement the survey. The article in the paper is focusing on numbers only. The final decision in the strategic plan will be developed from a result of all the information gathered. Any survey can be picked apart question by question. The City of Washougal is interested in the input from its citizens and businesses to help shape our future. Let's focus on the results of the entire process of having citizens' involvement with their community. I support the work of the strategic planning team and encourage them to continue to develop our city with the input of the citizens that will be affected by their decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Good evening, Don.
Hello, Don Boland, 32934 Southeast 20th Street. I'm here also to talk about the survey strategic plan. I guess I'm on the side that says I think it should be redone. And I read by the way, I want to thank Michael Delavar for bringing it to light. And as I understand what's been said, I was just at the wrong meetings at the wrong times. It was what they were talking about at the public input. I wasn't there. And I might have not made a contribution anyway. But as far as demographics, I think it's extremely important to, in a survey, to know who's filling it out. And I can't tell you how many, well, I've filled out as many surveys, I'm sure as you have, and the first thing is what's your name, your age, what's your status, are you retired, do you work? But they recognize that who's answering the question has a different impact. To me, that would have been the first flag looking at the questionnaire. Of course, that's hindsight now. But I guess the other thing that bothered me on question 12 and reading it in the paper, when you look at the categories, it didn't, the first option you had was 12. I mean, the first option on question 12 was to go to 20,000. I think I would have preferred much more an open-ended question where you ask the people what do they feel the population size of Washougal should be. Now, I'll give you a hypothetical. I think if you're talking to people, and it should be in the questionnaire that we're here 40 years, but 80-90% would say it's too big now. But that's the data that the survey is supposed to flush out. The other thing I had was a problem with 12, because when I looked at it, it was asking more than one question. Where should you spend the money, and how should it be funded? Those are separate, discrete questions. And if if I did a survey, I would ask, here's the categories we spend the money, spread 100% where you think it should be spent. Then you get a distribution and you know what the public's thinking. Let's see. I guess where I am, I think the survey needs to be redone. Little doubt in my mind, and I would support it financially or anyway. The thing that bothers me, and I thought of it 2 reasons. Why would the survey come out that that's biased? Is it just an oversight? Or is it some survey that they have the answer, so we'll have the survey justify the answer? I hope it's not the latter. But like I said, I think it should be disregarded. And I don't know what a public citizen can do, but I'd certainly finance getting somebody in to redo the survey and let the council take a look at it, see the questions, and certainly get the demographics of who's voting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Don. Anybody else that would like to address council? Seriously?
I know you don't want me to say anything. Ann Garden, 4813 K Street. I think anybody who did not participate in all of the advertising that was done with this survey and didn't go to any of those community meetings and didn't do the surveys online, as you guys had announced to everybody, has no right to complain about it. You cannot afford to redo it. It's not something that, take it for what it's worth and move forward.
Thank you, Mrs. Guard. Anybody else from the audience that would like to address council? Okay, moving into staff presentations. Washougal School District Capital Facilities Plan and Impact Fee Updates.
Your
Mitch?
Honor, the school district's representatives are both here this evening. I'd like to start kind of, if you don't mind, kind of going over the agenda bills and roll into that presentation with council.
Okay,
Yes. The school district, they're updating both their capital facility plans and their impact fee updates. And like everything within planning, it starts with the Growth Management Act. The Growth Management Act, one of the mandatory elements is capital facility planning, and it requires any public entity within that to develop a capital facility plan. The school district is tasked with doing that capital facility plan, and the school board is tasked then with also implementing or adopting an impact fee and making that recommendation to council. There is an interlocal with the school districts that the city has entered into, and that interlocal specifies those parameters for adoption of the capital facility plan as well as the impact fees. The school board adopts their CFP, and it adopts the school impact fee, and it does that after a public hearing at the school board. The city then must incorporate that school CFP into the city's comprehensive plan, And they have to do that, council has to do that by adoption into our comprehensive plan. And the city must also adopt the school impact fees into the city's code under Chapter 1545. So the agenda bills, you will have 4 of them. They were all public hearings coming up on the 5th. For Washougal, you'll have a public hearing to adopt the Washougal School District Capital Facility Plan. You'll have a public hearing to update the school impact fee. And then for Camas, you'll have a public hearing to adopt their school capital facility plan and another hearing to adopt their school impact fee. Those will be separate motions and all separate hearings. Let's talk school impact fees for a minute here, and then we'll turn it over to the school district to kind of, with their presentation, get into some more of the details associated with the CFP and the impact fees. What you see up here is a slide that shows what the existing single-family SIF or school impact fee is for Washougal and for Camas, and the existing multifamily school impact fees for Washougal and Camas. You'll notice they're both $4,000 for single family and $2,000 for multifamily. And that was what you have adopted in February, I believe February of 2010. The school proposed school impact fee for Washougal is $2,683, and for Camas it's $4,460. And then the school for the multifamily is $2,689 for Washougal and $2,604 for Camas. Now, the Planning Commission, in their deliberations and in their motion to you, you'll see in the agenda bill, that they felt that the increase to the multifamily rate would inhibit or prohibit or hinder in some way the development of multifamily property. So they recommended that there would be no change to that multifamily rate of $2,000. Their recommendation to you is for it to stay at the $2,000. In the hearing, the motion to council will be to specify what that impact fee will be. And so that will be then filtered into the ordinance itself. So with that, I will turn it over to Marnie Allen, and she's here representing the school districts, and I'll let her do the introductions of others in here as well.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, and staff. Thank you for your work and support processing the school district's updated capital facility plans and impact fees. We appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you tonight about the capital facility plans and impact fees. What I'd like to do is just start with the Washougal School District Capital Facility Plan, highlight a couple of items that are in that plan, talk about their school impact fees, do the same thing with regards to Camas's plan and fees, and then I will turn it over to the superintendent from the Washougal School District, who will make a few remarks, and then the facilities director from the Camas School District. And then we'd be happy collectively to answer any questions that you might have. So starting with the Washougal School District Capital Facility Plan, this plan contains all the required elements to draw a map for the city as you're planning for growth in the city as to how schools will be provided to serve your planned and anticipated growth. Over the next 6 years, the Washougal School District anticipates that there will be an increase of just under 400 new students moving into the district, living in new houses and apartments that are built in the district. The bulk of that growth will occur at the elementary and middle school levels. So the capital facility plan shows an expansion and upgrade at Jumpty Middle School to serve the forecast middle school growth, and then construction of a new elementary school on the Kerr property to serve the forecast growth at the elementary level. The school impact fees are calculated using a formula that's in the city ordinance, in the county ordinance, and that's used across the state. That attempts to allocate a portion of the cost to build the elementary and the middle school to the new houses and apartments that place the demand on the schools, so that they're helping offset the costs. And I say offset because if you were to look at the average cost to build a new school for one student, anywhere between $30,000 to $40,000 to build new elementary school capacity for one student. The Camas and Washougal school districts are requesting, 10% or less of what it would cost to build the school for one student in an impact fee. So school impact fees are not intended to make new development pay all of the costs to build new schools, but they are intended to make sure they're paying their fair share of the costs. The Washougal School District's updated school impact fees, every time we update the plan, we update the construction costs, the improvements that need to be built. So for example, back in 2010, the plan that you adopted and the plan the district was working on at the time was to build a new K-8 facility on the Jumpty Guard site. There was a lot of work done in the community. A bond measure was placed before the voters, and the voters said, no, we don't want to build a new K-8. Instead, we want to look at expanding and modernizing Jumpty Guard and building a new elementary school. And so the plan was revised. When the plan's revised and the construction costs are updated, then the fees are calculated using that new data, which causes the fee amounts to change. And in this case, the calculated school impact fees back in 2010 for Washougal were $5,857 for a single-family home. That is the amount that Clark County adopted and assessed on new housing, and that the city of Camas adopted and assessed on new housing. The Washougal City Council, as you may recall, decided not to increase the fees to the recommended amount of the school board, and you only increased it to $4,000. So while the fees you're currently collecting are $4,000 and $2,000, those fees are less than what was calculated and requested by the board 2 years ago. The fees have dropped from the calculated amount 2 years ago to what's calculated and being requested today, primarily because there are fewer students living in new houses and because the construction costs have dropped with the change in Washougal's plan. So the school board, after hearing public comment, looking at its financing sources to pay for new schools and evaluating its needs, has requested that the City Council adopt the calculated fee amounts. So $2,683 for single family in Washougal and $2,689 for multifamily. I understand that the Planning Commission had concerns about the multifamily fee amount going up from $2,000 to $2,689, and there were concerns that that would somehow prevent development of multifamily houses in Washougal. I'd like to make just a couple of comments about that. First, if you look at what's been happening in Clark County and you look at what the school impact fees are in other districts in the county and you look at development that's happening in other districts in the county, in the Battleground School District and in the Evergreen School District, those are two of the districts where the majority of multifamily housing that has been built, that's where it's being built. It isn't being built, hasn't been being built in the city of Washougal or the city of Camas. The multifamily fee in the Battleground School District has been $3,500 per multifamily unit, and in the Evergreen School District, it was $3,969. So while the fee was $2,000 in Washougal, was significantly higher in other districts, and yet those other districts saw more development of multifamily housing than Washougal or other jurisdictions where the fee was lower. So while it's tempting to draw the conclusion that if you raise the multifamily fee, multifamily housing won't be built, that doesn't appear to be what is a primary driver of the decision about where you build multifamily housing. It's probably more supply, demand, and other factors that drive that decision. I'd like to, unless you have questions about Washougal's calculated fees or plan, just summarize what's in the Camas School District plan and talk a little bit about their fee amounts.
Marnie, before you jump there, on the upgrades to Jumpty Guard, when would those be forecast to happen?
Sometime over the next 6 years, and it'll be dependent
Okay, so
on
not-
passage of a bond.
Okay.
We'll have to have bond proceeds to make that happen.
And same thing with the elementary school, the new
Yes.
elementary school, so there's no definite timeline.
Right.
Okay.
What I will say, and I'll let Dawn or Doug Bright correct me if this has changed, but when this plan was prepared, the thought was that Jumpty Guard would be expanded and modernized first, and then the elementary school would come second. Now, it probably depends if that doesn't happen for 2 or 3 years and growth continues to spike, because there's been an increase in the enrollment in the Washougal School District this year. They may have to do both of those improvements together, but there's not a set timeline.
Okay. Any other
Just,
Council questions?
just that the council will address this again next year at this time as well, right?
We usually do it every 2 years
years?
unless there's a
Okay.
big change in enrollment or facilities.
Okay.
For the Camas School District then, kind of just touching on the same things, their anticipated growth over the next 6 years, as shown in their plan, is for about 716 students, with the majority of their growth being at the elementary and the high school level. So their plan shows construction of a new elementary and expansion and improvements at the high school. Camas is the fortunate school district in all of Clark County in that they had their bond measure passed, and they're the only district that's been actively building. Well, Evergreen School District has some qualified school construction bonds to build a 500-student magnet science program, Health and Bioscience Academy. But other than Camas and Evergreen, the districts right now across the county are struggling to get bond proceeds to pay for new facilities. But Camas is fortunate in that we're able to secure those funds and have been building the schools. Their school impact fees were recalculated using the costs for their new elementary school and the expansion at their high school. Their calculated fees back in 2010 were $5,528 for single family and $3,269 for multifamily. The city didn't adopt those higher amounts back in 2010, but kept it at $4,000 and $2,000. Their new fee amounts have dropped a little from $5,528 to $4,460. That was because there was a slight decrease in the number of students living in new houses in the Camas School District. And then same thing for multifamily. It dropped from $3,269 to $2,604. You might ask yourself, I ask myself, geez, the single-family fee in the Camas School District is $4,460. That's the calculated fee amount. And in Washougal, the calculated amount's only $2,683 for single-family homes. Why is there such a big difference? And the primary reason for the difference is because it's relative, but there's a significantly fewer number of students living in new houses in the Washougal School District as compared to the Camas School District. So in the Washougal school district, there's only 0.438 students on average living in a new house, so every 2 houses produces 1 student. In the Camas School District, there's 0.670 students on average living in a new house. Now, every 2 years when we update the plan and recalculate the fees, we update those averages as well. So that's another reason why you see the fees change. But that's the primary reason why the fees are higher in Camas than in Washougal. So the Washougal School Board is requesting, as is the Camas School Board, that you adopt the calculated fee amounts for both single and multifamily. It would mean a slight increase in the multifamily fee in both districts. We understand the Planning Commission didn't recommend that, but we're respectfully requesting that you consider the work the board's done, the need to adequately fund schools, and that you consider adopting the school board's recommendation. If you don't have any more technical kind of questions for me related to the plan or the fees, then I'd like to turn it over to Don Tarzian, Superintendent from Washougal School District, who will make a few remarks. Question first?
John?
Over a year ago, we embarked on a deferment program where we were allowing developers to come in and create commercial development in the hopes of bringing business and also residential developers as well. The school district, both school districts, opted to not take part in that deferment program. Basically, we were just told, not interested. It really would have been great to have the school district as a partner in that program, and would like to know if the school district would still be open to considering participating in that program.
We certainly can convey that information to the representatives from the districts, and they can take it back to the board. The reason that the school districts did not support deferring the timing for when school impact fees were paid was twofold. One, because if you wait until certificate of occupancy is issued, there are kids living in those houses and the district doesn't have enough time to get the portable or the schools or whatever needs to be in place up and ready to occupy them. The other reason is because the school districts in the county did participate in a pilot temporary one-year program to defer collection of school impact fees in the county. Not one developer took advantage of it, and it was somewhat complicated in terms of needing to record that it had been deferred, making sure it was collected. How are you going to manage those risks between, in this case, the county and the districts, for you, the city and the districts? And so given that it was a tool that involved some risk, required significant work, and put the district kind of behind the 8 ball, and yet no one took advantage of it. It didn't seem like a good tool or something that the districts were eager to get behind. It doesn't mean they wouldn't consider it if you wanted them to do that.
Thank you.
I'm a little confused. I keep hearing the word recommended and requested, and it's my understanding that the numbers that the school board brought forward are purely calculated according to law, that there's no judgment, no request, no vetting involved in that. It's a pure calculation. Is that not accurate?
No, that's not accurate. The school board looks at the calculated amount, and they have the discretion if they thought that amount was too high to recommend something lower. And back, at least 5 years ago, a lot of the districts did recommend something lower than the calculated amount. But then they received a lot of criticism, frankly, from elected officials and from the community about why aren't you requiring new development to pay their share? You're not able to keep up with building schools and paying for them, and yet you're recommending something less than what you could get under the formula. So now the boards look at what's the maximum amount we can ask the city or county to collect. And when I say recommended, it's because under the Growth Management Act, you have the final say in what the amount is. So they're recommending that you collect the calculated amount, but they do look at and have a public meeting where these issues are discussed and where they adopt their decision.
And then a second part of that is that last time we were here, there were, for all intents and purposes, no new multifamily units in Washougal over the, I think it's 6-year calculation period. And therefore, as is according to law, the district opted for countywide numbers. Are there new units this year?
There were not when we updated the plans. So they're using, both Camas and Washougal did not have enough new multifamily housing developed in the district boundaries to support a reliable, independent multifamily rate. So we're using a district-wide average.
So
Countywide, I'm sorry, not district, countywide.
So when we say county-wide, does that mean county not including city limits, or does that include Battleground and Evergreen and?
Includes Battleground and Evergreen and Vancouver. It includes the entire county, inside city limits and unincorporated Clark County, where there's multifamily.
Thank you.
Other questions for Marnie? Dawn, welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Dawn Parzian, 3233 38th Court here in Washougal. I appreciate the opportunity to address the City Council. And first want to express my appreciation for your leadership, being new to the community and reviewing the community and the school district as I made my decision to apply for this job. I will share with you that the planning that has gone in to sustaining the district and the community is very evident for an outsider. And as an Oregonian, I have looked north, envious of the Washington State's ability to plan things better than we were in Oregon. So I'm a bit disappointed to find out there is a reality in Washington as well that does not, however, undermine the careful leadership and the thoughtful planning to keep things sustained while also planning for the future. This is not a plan that I was involved in developing, but one that I have reviewed and would want the council to know that this is an extremely important funding source for the school district. The thoughtful process that the board went through that Marnie has described for you is very accurate in terms of their weighing both the needs of the families and developers and the health of the community currently against the future health issues for our future generations that will be attending our schools. This last year, we saw an unexpected growth that was very much related to the growth that occurred in Camas. And so our interrelatedness as communities along East Clark County is very real. And we had as many as 40 children who returned to the Washougal School District who had been attending Camas based on their growth there. So growth in that community impacted us as well, as they had to revoke boundary approvals to have kids come back to Washougal. This process of planning healthy buildings and future thinking about that impacts us even currently in ways that maybe are not fully understood by the plan. We have been able to accomplish about $100,000 savings annually in the last couple of years due to energy efficiency measures. Jemtegard is our poster child for our failure around that. And the design of that school, every time a door opens to a classroom, we have to reheat that building. The need to get in there and upgrade that building is essential, which will, I think, affect some long-term savings as well. Marnie described for you a process that tries to, I have appreciated her involvement and her educating me as a new superintendent because you heard her speak very articulately to the thoughtful comparators across districts and the affordability of the rates that are set. And so what I have heard about the council's leadership is that you are very thoughtfully weighing the impact of fees such as these on the health of residents currently, on the impact of whether these fees will encourage growth or prohibit growth. And so, I appreciate that this council weighs those things while also knowing that the school district is doing that well. It bodes well for the future of the community. You have a strong school system. You have a community that is incredibly attractive to newcomers. My goal as your new superintendent is to keep your school system strong, to attract individuals not only who live in our community but live near our community to receive a good education. I continue to believe that the look of the buildings, their ability to sustain, safe environments in which kids can learn is going to play a large role in our ability to attract families. So thank you for this opportunity to speak. Thank you for your leadership. These are difficult times. As again, you try and keep our systems going while at the same time try and plan for a future that doesn't look rosy in any foreseeable future. So thank you. Any questions for me?
Jemtegard is within the scenic boundary for the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. Have you had any even informal discussions with the Gorge Commission or Friends of the Gorge about whether they're going to have any problem with more than remodeling, really significantly upgrading, maybe even changing the footprint at Jemtegard?
Have not started that. I don't know whether the district prior to my arrival did. Marnie, has that begun?
That did occur when we were looking at building a new K-8. We met with Friends of the Gorge and we met with representatives from the Gorge Commission staff and sat down with the district's architect and talked about plans and ways and things that could be done to minimize the impacts on the view corridor in the gorge. And those conversations were cooperative, friendly, and supportive. It didn't evolve to a point where they were looking at something being built. And I
Right.
But we did have those conversations, and we would do that again come time, once we had plans and a bond for what the new school looked like.
Yeah, just a little history there. A few years ago, I think there was great concern that it would be essentially impossible to change the footprint of the building because of the Gorge Commission. But since that time, I personally have had conversations with Friends of the Gorge and some of the Gorge Commission, and by and large, they seem quite friendly to the idea of doing whatever needed to be done at Jemtegaard. So I just wanted to make that part of the public record also.
We'll keep you involved when we get there too, because
We are partnering with the Friends of the Gorge and do have middle schoolers that are involved in service projects that the Friends are organizing. I will share with you that there is a mascot deer that literally walks the campus there at Jemtegaard as kids walk by, and it is affectionately known as Donut. And so I do have a deep sense of the importance that that campus remains a natural environment.
Well, I was just concerned but my understanding is that both the Friends and the Commission are taking the point of view that upgrades to that facility are entirely consistent with the Scenic Act.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions for Don? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don.
Good evening. I'm Heidi Rosenberg, and I'm with the Camas School District. So good evening to all of you. My work address is 841 Northeast 22nd Avenue in Camas. I live in Vancouver. I don't know if you want that address as well. Okay. And just wanted to speak shortly on the Camas 2007 bond. And yes, we were, I think, the last bond passed, and probably by the skin of our teeth. And if it had been a couple months later, probably would not have passed. So you just never know on that kind of thing. We've just about completed the majority of the projects. I have one last elementary school to complete, and if you drive down Crown Road, you will see construction both on the road itself, and if you were allowed to be on the site, which if you would like to, I can give you a tour. The school is actually set back on the back side of the site, and it will serve both students in the city of Camas and students in the city of Washougal. It's about it'll be about a 600 student new school. So just wanted to let that will open in 2013 in the fall.
I'm sorry.
2013 in the fall. So otherwise we've finished the majority of the projects. The last one, in addition to that, is to expand our parking lot for the transportation facility, and that's not in the capital facilities program because it's not an increase in students. So do you have any questions for me?
I was just curious, where on Crown Road? It's west of Crown Road, right?
So it's on the west side. It's, if you go up Crown Road, it's the lot immediately north of the Lacamas Park. It's about 2,500, just before you get to 283rd.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Heidi. Any other questions on any of the 4 agenda bills? Paul?
Curiosity, questions from Mitch. First, I guess, the question would be, where is multifamily an outright permitted use where it's not already multifamily?
Where it's not developed as multifamily?
Right, right.
Well, if you recall in the email that I sent with the boundary location, the Woodburn Hills sub-area is not necessarily outright. It doesn't have a comprehensive plan designation, if you will, for multifamily. However, it does allow for multifamily to occur within the Woodburn Hills sub-area with a conditional use permit. So that's an area where the plan itself doesn't necessarily identify for planning purposes, really from a school district standpoint, for multifamily. However, it can occur. Other than that, we have outright zoned multifamily property north of G Street, along G Street, north of E there.
between what, about 6th and,
It goes back just east of Hathaway through there. We did rezone some of it that fronted along East Street. There was some that was multifamily that got rezoned, but there's still a portion of it back behind. I'd be happy to provide a map prior to next week that kind of identified that.
that'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the other question is, one of the things that people of my hair color think about is aging in place. And so I'm curious if there were senior housing, which I think the law says you have to be 55 or older is the shortest, is the youngest that you can set that.
Our code says 65.
Says 65. Yeah, 55 I think is the federal issue, but I could be wrong on that. Does senior housing pay school impact fees?
No.
Is there any other kind of consideration as to whether a particular multifamily situation generates students for the school district or not?
A any other, at a multifamily rate.
Right.
Other than apartments, that's the only thing that we have. Condominiums are not multifamily.
Right.
Duplexes are not multifamily. Townhouses are not multifamily. It's really apartments.
Okay. And other than, I mean, frankly, not a lot of those in Washougal other than down on Addy Street, right?
And there's some off of, I believe it's aged just east of, or excuse me, just west of 32nd. There's some in there too.
Right, right.
There's some down on C Street, West End.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Great, thank you.
Rob?
It should always seems to come back to whether it'll slow down growth. That's one of the topics that's come up over year after year after year. How do they, in your cohorts throughout the county, do they see the same thing that the elected officials all debate whether this is going to be have an impact on growth within their jurisdiction? And if so, I mean, does it play out that way ultimately?
Well, I think Marnie kind of gave you the evidence of that, where the rates are actually higher in other locations, and yet they're still building. And so there are probably other factors that are coming into play, and it's not just that as a consideration.
I've never understood that, they set the rate, so it's what's their request. We're just a collection agency, really, ultimately, and yet we still get to dictate whether they get $4,000 or whether they get $2,000 per residence. If it doesn't have any effect on growth, doesn't deter people from moving to Washougal, I don't understand why we've never given them the amount that. And why did Planning Commission change those numbers from the request?
I think it was captured in their motion, and really in their comments leading up to that was that they just have a concern. They haven't seen development of multifamily. They don't want anything to get in the way of that development of multifamily. Ultimately, I think back when council made the decision before, I mean, we were dealing with, it was really, I think what we dealt with before was sticker shock. We were going from $900 up to over almost $4,000. And that was really perceived as something that just, couldn't be fathomed and would be, the dagger to the heart of multifamily. But, right now, the Planning Commission didn't have any concern with the increase for single family in Camas. It was just the multifamily rate across the board.
In essence, if they don't come back for 2 years, we might see 100 homes in Washougal built, maybe in the next couple of years? I mean, is that a
Couple
projected?
years? I hope so, yeah.
Yeah.
Year and a half. What are you at now, Mitch, for 2011 alone?
58?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe a little over 100, but they're all looking for their money just as well as every other agency is to fund those things that they've identified that they need.
Well, I think it's rightly so it comes to council because all the impact fees come to council. You have to look at transportation, you have to look at parks, and you have all of those fees that collectively create an impact fee, if you will, for single-family and for multifamily. And so balancing all those is what you have to look at. But clearly, you know, what the school board did is consistent with the law and the calculation and the formula, and you know, that's the number that, that's being presented.
Thanks.
Okay, so when we talk about Battlegrounds development of multifamily versus Washougal's development of multifamily, I think that school impact fees can be a part of it, certainly. And as you mentioned, that's not the only factor. I would say that the mere fact that Battleground has had multifamily development and they've had higher impact fees than we have doesn't necessarily mean anything about whether or not our impact fees were a factor or not a factor. I think that there are many, many different reasons why people develop in different places, including whether or not they got a sweet deal on the land itself. And so I think it would be a little short-sighted of us to say that, well, just because one jurisdiction had multifamily development and we didn't, therefore it's irrelevant what our fees are. I think that always does have some influence. We would have to look at other factors and maybe even case-specific reasons why those developments happened in Battleground versus here. But it is a sticky argument no matter how you look at it, as far as whether we accept the recommended number or whether we accept, or I should say, chart our own course or accept the Planning Commission's numbers. And yeah, still don't know which way we should go on this one.
You know, I would say, you know, that to your point is that the Planning Commission didn't necessarily look at any other factor besides cost. I mean, they were not looking at, you know, allocation of property and doing any kind of analysis between other municipalities or anything like that. It was simply the number on the page and deciding that that fee is going up, and that in and of itself would be a deterrent to multifamily property.
Well, also, when you take a look at these costs being 10% of the estimated cost per child, we're really not collecting everything needed to build that school. I also understand there's a really strange, well, if I understand correctly, you reach a certain point where you're at capacity, you add one more student, that one student tips you over into the category of needing a whole new school. Yeah, he's not the one student that's necessarily going to be needing that whole school, but at the same time, now you fit into a different category. I think that's always a challenging one, because we can talk about the density of, or should say the expected number of children in a household by city. I think there might be more than simply just Camas having, on average, more children per household. I think even that may actually be reflecting a different thing. I'm not absolutely positive about that, because I haven't delved into the numbers on that one yet. But on some level, it would almost be more fair, even though I know this is a horrible suggestion, to say that if you build a family, or say a home, and you have X number of children, you pay X number of fees, which would be more accurate as far as the impact, but obviously we can't go that direction, and I wouldn't want to go that direction. Yeah.
Other questions from council?
If I can make just one comment, correct myself, it's actually 62. It's not 65. It's 62 for senior living under our code.
Some of us are 3 years closer.
Myself included.
Some might already be there.
A couple of us are over the top.
Mitch, question for yourself or Marnie or maybe Doug. In this is a little bit off topic, but not if we're looking at a 6-year window. The Kerr property and where the administrative office is in the Schmid ball fields. We have a significant amount of upgrades that need to be done to infrastructure getting to those properties in order just to add that third field out there. We trip over that requirement. Do we know, and Jim, you may know this as well, do we know if just adding making the improvements and the added capacity to jump to guard and/or the new elementary school on that property will trip those same traffic numbers? to require the street improvements, the sidewalk improvements, the signal lighting at 39th and 34th?
I can't speak to jump to guard, but I mean, I think that development in and of itself is really to accommodate the growth that's already there. It's not necessarily adding new trips or anything like that. It's contemplating, you know, what they're dealing with. As far as the baseball field, it's my understanding the last time that we dove into that is really when we start getting into that third field, and then that expansion is really where we're set to have those improvements. That's that trigger for those improvements.
The expansion of the fields or the expansions of a new school?
It was the expansion of the third field is where we were going to get into that. Now, every time that when we looked at field one, we had that trigger, we went back and did an analysis and deferred. When we looked at field two, we went back, did an analysis and deferred. I'm not saying that can't be the case on field three. We may have to go back and do an analysis and defer until the school district does improvements to that property in terms of a facility, a school building or a transportation facility, because that definitely would.
Somewhere in the mix, let's just make sure that Rob or somebody is in charge or in contact with Marnie so that we know from our standpoint what things we're gonna have to be coming up with in our transportation facilities plan as well for all of those areas, if we're gonna have some responsibilities going into those, if you're truly in a 6-year window.
Right, well, if I might.
Yep.
And definitely want to work in partnership with that so that we don't underbuild improvements just to accommodate trips for a field that we have to turn around and rebuild because 2 years later we're building a new school. So we'll want to communicate and see how close we are to building a school, how many trips will be generated from the field, and then forecast needs for the school. So I would hope we would do that.
But I just wanna make sure we're all on the same page too, so that as you're doing frontage improvements out there, and I know some of those were deferred even without fields, you know, obviously there's gotta be some connectivity as well, which probably isn't gonna fall on your side, it's gonna fall on our side, and we need to be prepared in budgets to be able to do that and or start looking for additional grant funds. Thank you very much. Okay, turning away from school impact fees to another fun topic, a commute trip reduction interlocal agreement. Mitch? Thank you all.
Thank you, Your Honor and Council. Commute trip reduction interlocal agreement and resolution adoption. What we're looking at here, just a little bit of background, probably as you all know, the CTR law was passed by the state in 1991, and it was in an effort to address traffic congestion, air pollution, and petroleum fuel consumption. Then in 2006, the CTR Efficiency Act was passed that required local governments with traffic congestion to develop programs that reduce drive-alone trips and vehicle miles traveled per capita. And it's really this act, if you will, that makes us subject to commute trip reduction is the traffic that goes across the interstate bridge is even with Vancouver, which is an urban growth boundary that has to comply with CTR. Camas shares a boundary with that municipality. We share a boundary with that Camas, and therefore we're at a contiguous urban growth boundary subject to that. So that's what and we have a business that meets that qualification, which is Pendleton Woolen Mills. So that's why we are in the Commute Trip Reduction Act and subject to that. So in 2010, this council adopted an update to the CTR plan, and that's in the code, and that's Title 10.35. Really, we basically threw the old one out, put the new one in. You'll all remember conversations we had about that. That's not what is before you now. We're not touching 10.35. So what is before you is the interlocal agreement, which is really just well, let me get into it. What does that do? It allocates the funding from the state to the city of Vancouver to administer the CTR program. This is a funded program by the state. that money is then allocated to Vancouver, who has a full-time dedicated staff person that runs the CTR program for Vancouver, Camas, Washougal, and the county. It implements the work plan for compliance with state law, and it saves us time and money and keeps us in compliance with that state law. So the recommended action for next Monday is to make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the mayor to sign the commute trip reduction interlocal agreement and approve the work plan through the approval of the consent agenda.
Council questions? Dave?
The folks that came down from the state gave us a very informative booklet on this program. One of the little factoids in there was that 92% of the impact improvement in air quality and commute trip reduction would be in the Seattle metropolitan area and the surrounding area. So we're talking about 8% for the rest of the state, and Washougal's included in that 8%. So it's not something that has a big impact on us, and we're not going to have a big impact on the program. When we looked at this last time, we took the $100 a day fine that goes against people who are businesses that aren't in compliance and reduced it down to $10 after a lot of discussion. What would be the impact of moving this to have us be part of this Vancouver-led effort on that particular aspect of it?
It doesn't change anything with what you adopted in Title 10.35.
So we still have a $10 a
Yes.
day as opposed to whatever Vancouver comes up with?
Whatever Vancouver has and whatever Camas has.
Okay. Mitch, I got to tell you, I feel sorry for you having to put this thing forward. I think this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But under those circumstances, I'd probably vote for it. Thanks.
John?
I just found $200,000 the governor could use to put back in the budget by getting rid of this program, but that's all I'd say.
It's another one of those that's up to the state legislature. She can't do it on her own. Other comments from council? Questions? Molly?
Yes, I know there's been disagreement from a number of members from the council, and I can certainly understand that on this entire program and how it really targets high-density metropolitan areas in our state, and that's really the intent of it. However, I would certainly support this as it is a state law, and should we choose to disagree with it, then it would be our responsibility as citizens to lobby legislators to change that law. So that, but I do think we have a responsibility as elected officials to conform to state law.
But, Mr. Mayor, I don't understand that this would be a state law for us to have an interlocal agreement, would it?
No.
No.
Okay.
All this agenda bill does and all the interlocal does is allows us to pick up a lot of cost efficiencies by sending our little amount of the share of what the state reimburses for to Vancouver, along with some other jurisdictions, to make it more cost effective for a central person to administer it on behalf of all of us.
So when that central person administers it, what would they do in relationship to the city of Washougal? I mean, I understand that there's some requirement for us to educate the people who fall under the commute trip reduction code, so they would pick up that portion as well? And what about updates to our CTR code? How would that be interfacing with this agreement?
Well, they're actually the ones that had the original draft. So when you updated the last one, that original draft came to you. It was obviously modified by the council, but they did all that upfront work for us. They actually, one of the other things is that we're required to report, because we have, as a city, we're required to generate a report because we have a business that is subject to it. So they actually basically generate that report. We have input into it, but they for all intent and purposes, put it together for us. Then we sign off, and then they facilitate that to the state.
Do we have any estimate for how much staff time we spend on the CTR?
No, actually, I am the CTR liaison for the city. Ariana Baldwin is the ETC coordinator, who she does, she's phenomenal, and she actually coordinates that work with the Employment Wellness Committee, and so they kind of work together there in order to do that. Time, staff time, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay. And as far as enforcement action, if this interlocal agreement was signed onto, who would be responsible for pursuing enforcement against Pendleton or any other businesses that would fall under the CTR code?
I believe it's actually the city, but I will, not Washougal, but, you know, I'd like to go back and find out that answer for you and let you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dave?
I'd like to agree with Molly on 2 points. One of them is that this is a state law and we have to comply with it. And the second one is, I think we have an obligation as elected officials to lobby the state when we think they're making a mistake. And some of us think that this is a bad mistake. Thanks, Mitch.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, moving to Public Works. Jim, a repeal of cemetery promissory notes and time payments.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Yes, this is more or less a housekeeping item. The cemetery board actually brought this to our attention. I know it's been the council's desire to look at Washougal Administrative Code where we can and delete those portions if they're not necessary. So these are portions 2.44075 and also 2.44077. And neither of these options really has been utilized over the last 6 years by any of the citizenry. And the city is, really, we're not a banking or lending institution, so it makes it difficult to administer these type of agreements. Also, there's an issue with if there was a default on a promissory note, it could be construed as gifting of public funds. And, you know, again, there's lower cost financing options available for customers through qualified lending institutions. So it's the recommended action of the cemetery board and also staff to repeal both of these Washougal Municipal Code and read the title by title only, repealing these two codes, WMC 2.44075 and WMC 2.44077. Any questions?
Molly?
No, just a comment. As a liaison to the cemetery board, I was pleased to see that they had taken that, that they initiated that action, having reviewed code, and they felt similarly like as that the city was not a bank nor a lending institution. And as it was code that is no longer necessary or probably effective for the city, that it should be repealed.
Dave?
One of the things I picked up on here was that defaulted promissory note transactions result in the gifting of public funds. That's against the state of Washington's Constitution. I'm so glad you picked up on that and are getting us out of this business. I certainly will support that on that basis alone. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Jim, do we know where these even came from? Were these, you know, hardship cases or something years ago that that language was put into the books?
Yeah, I believe that was the intent originally. If people could not afford it, then they could, you know, the city could issue a promissory note and they could pay payments. But again, you know, lending institutions, they can get a lower rate out there with other lenders, so.
Okay,
I believe that was the original intent, yes.
thank you. Agenda bill on the annual lease for the Children's Home Society.
Yes, this is our annual lease for the Children's Home Society, And that's our social services center located at 1702 C Street, so right across the street here. And the term of the lease is for 1 year. It's been 1 year for the past few years. We actually received a CDBG grant back in 2006 to do some upgrades on the facility. And so it's our recommended action that you authorize the mayor to sign the lease agreement with the Children's Home Society. And the lease agreement's there before you in Exhibit A. Also, I'd like to bring to your attention on Exhibit A, we double-checked today. Actually, David Scott brought this to our attention, and we did double-check with the attorneys, Don English. And under 4.9, under surrender, the very last sentence in that paragraph, well, it's actually one sentence, but at the very last line, it says ordinary wear and tear and damage, fire and elements alone accepted. The last word accepted should be accepted, E-X-C-E-P-T-E-D. So those changes will be made before actual approval.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
No,
John? No.
Just remind us real quick, when we signed this, when we got the grant for this,
Yes.
part of that grant was keeping a nonprofit social service agency of some kind, not necessarily the Children's Home Society, but just of some kind in that building for how long?
I talked to Community Development Block Grant, Bonnie Scott, this afternoon, and there's actually a deed of trust that was signed in '07. And the deed of trust is a 20-year agreement, so we'd have about 16 years left on that. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be the Children's Home Society, but we do have to serve a low-income demographic in that building in some way, shape, or form.
Just as a follow-up, we've had this discussion the last several years. It hasn't been with just your administration, Mayor, but previous administration about kind of just the weird relationship. Not that it's, they've done anything wrong, but just the fact that we basically give them a place to operate and we give them money out of the budget. I think if there are members of this council who are wanting to see something different happen over there, one of the things that we may want to look at in the upcoming year is maybe having one of the committees look at what would be an alternative to the Children's Home Society, and bring something forward for the next cycle. So it maybe that is the best fit. But, at least maybe having a second look at that as we move forward.
Like, one of the things we could probably do, even first off before that, is discussing with Bridget what their use of the building even is. I don't believe they're using the complete building at this point. All 3 floors? Well, anyway, right now, we refer to it as Children's Home Society.
Right.
For all intents and purposes, most of us do. I refer to it as the Social Service Center because that's what it opened as, with a whole lot of different folks inside there. So I don't know that it would be out of the realm of, sharing that among different groups, depending on what the total uses are.
If I might, I did go over to their open house over there, and there are about 30 different agencies and non-governmental organizations. NGOs all the NGOs are 501c3s, tax exempts of various sorts. But also the county health and county mental health and a number of the WIC, Women, Infants, and Children's Nutrition Program runs out of that building. Children's Home Society actually operates as the manager, as you will, for the building. They do a lot of the programs themselves, but off the top of my head, 3 offices which are for various mental health organizations are locked in ways that Children's Home Society doesn't really have access to them because they have confidential records for that kind of thing. If you want to go over there when they're open, they have a number of charts on the wall about who they serve, both where they come from, and the real majority of them come from Washougal, and then some from Camas and some from the county. But also demographic information on age and income, and also on the various services that are provided over there. It's quite an operation, and all the Children's Home Society does is on the one hand, they manage the building, and then they also have quite a number of programs that they themselves do over there.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from council? Okay. Contractor Northwest Regional Training Center.
Yes, this is an annual contract that we renew every year, specifically in Public Works. And this is through Northwest Regional Training Center. And this is a money-saving effort for the city. It saves us quite a bit of money each year. If you consider some of these classes that are included here would normally cost between $100 and $150 per employee. This is close to a $30,000 savings for Public Works each year. So it's this is quite the program. We do this through an interlocal agreement, and this is a contract. And you can see actually in the appendix that these are required training courses. Under Appendix B, they have a list of the courses, and these are required through WSHA and L&I for the state. So these are regulatory requirements, basically, that we're looking at here. And through Northwest Regional Training Center, again, Exhibit B, there's a bar graph there that shows how costs have decreased over time. So this is a great program, great opportunity for our staff. It's close by and very beneficial. So we would just recommend that you authorize the mayor to sign the 2012 contract for services agreement with Northwest Regional Training Center. Any questions?
Okay. Moving on to a bid award for South First Street.
So this is a bid award for South First Street. This is in conjunction with SR 14 project. We did some upgrades to our water line, and this will continue through past Wesley Ford. And McDonald Excavating actually won the bid, and on November 18th, 2011, a bid opening was held for the South Street water line installation near Wesley Ford in conjunction with the SR 14 improvements project. And 3 bids were opened. And as I mentioned before, McDonald Excavating is the lowest qualified bidder. And so we are recommending that you award the contract for the South First Street waterline project to McDonald Excavating and authorize the mayor to sign the contract documents. Are there any questions about that?
Dave?
Jim, 2 questions. One, my usual question. Does this firm have a track record that suggests they can complete the job?
Yes, they're a local company, and
I know.
we've used them several times. So, yeah, it's a pretty basic project as far as installing the water line goes. So
Okay,
they
and
should
that
do
was my
just
second
fine.
question. Is
Yeah,
this
they
the one
should.
down on Main Street?
Excuse me?
This is the one headquartered down on Main Street?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good to see the local guys in there.
Yeah.
Actually, all 3 of them are local. Rod?
Jim, would you give us your definition of a qualified bid? we have this question asked on a regular basis when we talk about bidding stuff.
Right.
And in there, it's always as a qualified bid. So what's your interpretation of a
Right,
qualified
it's just
bid?
that they have their insurance, their bonding up to date, and that, you know, that they're a qualified bidder, that they don't have any liens against them or issues, so.
Because I know that whenever time we go out for a bid on something, that generally has a tendency to come up, and you're not going to move this far unless they're a qualified bidder, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Jim,
Mr.
before
Mayor?
we move, yes.
Just a comment. I think it's a good idea to ask that question.
But it's already answered in the agenda packet.
Not to my,
It says they're qualified.
not to my satisfaction. I like to get the staff on record. And they're always willing to do that. I
That's
thank you for
redundancy
that.
though, isn't it? Isn't that redundancy?
I don't think so.
It says in here, it's qualified bid.
Jim, before we move from Public Works, you've got another award.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. This is for the pedestrian tunnel. This is another award that we received for the pedestrian tunnel, and this is from the Infrastructure Assistance Coordinating Council. And this is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping Washington communities identify and obtain resources they need to develop, improve, and maintain infrastructure. It consists of staff from state and federal agencies, local government associations, nonprofit, technical assistance organizations, and tribes. So we're excited about this award as well. We received an APWA award for the pedestrian tunnel, and this is the IACC Third Annual Infrastructure Award. So we're proud to accept this award from the IACC.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to administration. C-Tran and RTC interlocal agreement with Camas. David?
Thank you, Mayor. Council passed out before the meeting a draft of a proposed interlocal agreement. As you may recall, that roughly this time last year, we were engaging along with our partner in Camas regarding our joint representation on both the C-Tran and the RTC boards. And at that time, there was, I think, mutual discussion about the fact that it might be in our interests to more formalize our relationship with respect to how we rotate that joint representation so that it would be more predictable. And Lloyd and I committed to, in time for this cycle, to have something before you. So this draft starts that conversation. Although it's several pages long, it's a very straightforward relationship. It acknowledges our joint representation, and then it essentially establishes a rolling 3-year rotation. It would formally start this next year in 2012. It would start with Washougal holding the C-Tran seat, and we would hold that for 3 years. Camas would hold the alternate for the C-Tran seat, and then vice versa. Camas would hold the RTC seat, and Washougal would hold the alternate to the RTC seat. Also key to this is that there would be deference to each community who has the primary seat. So our process, which involves our appointment committee recommending to the full council for decision, would be the process that would determine the Washougal representative or the joint Washougal and Camas representative to C-Tran, and then we would defer to their process for the alternate, and then, of course, their process would appoint the RTC seat, and they'd defer to our process for the alternate. There is some language in here that seeks to acknowledge something that can happen on either of those groups, and that is that, depending upon circumstances, someone might be moving through leadership role on one of those boards, and potentially 3 years would not provide for that to fully consummate. So this agreement seeks to provide for that to kind of be a 3+1, if that is the eventuality. And then it also has language that says that by mutual agreement, this would mean separate actions of each council in agreement that a specific appointment or representation could be extended beyond that by mutual agreement. So it doesn't lock either community into anything if it can be mutually agreed upon. Its duration is indefinite, and then there's all the obligatory interlocal type language that you find in these. And Mayor, if it's your pleasure, we have it under your report, but just a little timeline and to talk about the appointments committee, I think it really dovetails right in with this. We also passed out a timeline, a one-page timeline. As the mayor mentioned at our last meeting, the CTRAN board is having a work session, or call it a planning retreat, and that is actually on Friday, December 9th. And I'll get the details out depending on who our representative will be. And they would appreciate whomever is going to be the representative beginning in January of 2012 attending that meeting, because Linda would still be in that seat. She would be the formal participant for Camas and Washougal, but would certainly appreciate and welcome whomever would be coming from Washougal, if this interlocal is approved, of course, attending as an observer, an active observer, if you would, at that meeting on the 9th. So there's a little bit of time importance to this. So this timeline just lays out how we anticipate that could take place. We're having our workshop tonight. Camas will be considering this next week at their work session, and any feedback that you have tonight that might make adjustments to this, we would make that and then deliver that over to Camas. We will, if it's your pleasure as a council, you can set up your appointments committee at your regular meeting next week. The code prescribes that you put together the appointments committee. It's the mayor and 2 members of the council. So you could do that on the 5th, and then the schedule follows there. It's pretty straightforward, so that we could get that done.
John?
You know, because the retreat is coming up, or the planning session is coming up so quickly, I would almost be in favor of just doing an expedited timeline and taking nominations from the floor at the next meeting for someone to take that position.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Then we can deal with the appointments committee and however that's going to break down, and the other appointments later in the month.
So let's put the CTRAN position on the formal agenda for next week.
So I will make that happen. We'll have to be creative. Our code prescribes the process by which you will make that appointment, and it says that the appointments committee first has to be established, and that then the appointments committee makes a recommendation for considerations. So we may have to do those in successive order, short of an ordinance, to change the process. But we could probably pull that off by taking some short recesses, perhaps, at our next meeting.
Well, I would think, if it's okay with the mayor, I mean, it doesn't say that we have to have a new appointments committee to appoint a new person for CTRAN. And since we have to appoint them this year, I think the existing appointments committee can make those recommendations, and we can take recommendations on the floor. So it's,
You can always just suspend your own rules as well.
yeah, or if you want to,
It's not a rule, it's an ordinance.
Yeah.
It's an ordinance. Councilman Russell, that may be a workable interpretation of the ordinance. I don't believe it speaks to which one. I think the intent of the provision was that there's a new appointments committee and that there's a season and a cycle of
Yeah.
appointments, but if it's the pleasure of the council to use the existing one.
I would agree with that if this appointment by the CTRAN bylaws has to be appointed before the end of this month. So it's a little different than the rest of the committees, which can be established in January.
Right.
So that's,
I don't think there's anything that has a requirement for the end of this month.
No.
The end of November, anyway, the end of December.
no, I'm sorry, the end of December, I'm sorry, December 31st, I stand corrected.
I'm not aware of, it could be. I can't recall if.
I only know that because I read it, because Battleground hastily reappointed their person because of that deadline. So that's how I read that in the paper.
So we certainly get letters from CTRAN asking us to make a decision, please make a decision, but other than that,
Particularly for this retreat, I think that was, point well taken.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that we deliver a process and procedure for you next week that will comply with the ordinance and meet with the need to have an appointment made before the end of your proceedings. However creatively we need to get that done.
Rod?
Dave, one of the things I see missing in here, that at least I don't find it, we have termination of agreement, duration of agreement, and severability, but what happens if somebody makes a big, huge blunder and has to be removed from this assignment?
The agreement is silent on that because it's an agreement that essentially defers to each respective community. So however our own ordinance or rules would deal with that is how we would deal with it, and then similarly in Camas.
Yeah.
Does it need to be in here then?
That would be something for the council's consideration and pleasure, because it does involve, by this agreement, you will be deferring to your colleagues in Camas for representation on either of these boards for a period of time.
Mr. Mayor.
Paul?
I just wanted to go back with John's thing. My memory is, and it's only a memory which is failing a bit, is that the Appointments Committee makes recommendations to the council.
Correct.
And the council makes a decision. It's not actually obvious to me that there has to be a recommendation.
That may be another way.
Dave will sort it out in the next few days.
Yes, if there has to be a recommendation, the only way this will work really, without it being sort of silly at the meeting with recesses in between, would be for the currently sitting Appointments Committee to convene right away this week and come up with a recommendation, and then we would have that on the agenda for the full council. If indeed Don and I can look at that and determine that it's not obligatory to have a recommendation, then we could engage in a process that would be the council's pleasure, such as nominations from the floor, et cetera.
Rod, in partial answer to your question, I think, in talking with Don earlier this year or last year on another issue that we had, I believe in answer to your question, the council can remove a council member if it's one that they have made the recommendation that they have approved. With only a couple of exceptions, I have the ability to unilaterally remove any committee member, whether it's council or whether it's one of our advisory boards or that type of stuff. As long as I've made the recommendation and you've confirmed the appointment, I can make the removal. But in this case, it would be the council that would be doing both the recommendation and the confirmation, so it would have to be the council that would have to do it. Now, I don't think you could tell Camas who they could put on there, nor could they tell us, but with due respect to each of your recommendations and confirmations, I would think you would have that ability to do that.
Mr. Mayor?
Dave?
I share Councilman Morris's concern, and I think the procedures are set up already. You can have a motion to, and I'm trying to remember the wording, to remove somebody, a vote of no confidence. That's what I'm trying to think of. If you have a vote of no confidence in a member, I believe that you can then move to removing the member from the appointment. And of course, the vote of no confidence would have to come initially from the home district or the home city of the representative. Well, wait a minute. It probably could come from the other one too, because it's a joint representative.
On these two, it would be respective to each city.
Okay, so, but a vote of no confidence, I think, would raise that issue and give us the ability to remove somebody. On that basis, I'll vote for your agreement here. I know you're on a short timeline, and I don't want to confuse the issue, but I do share the concern.
Any other questions or concerns for Dave? Okay. We're at that point in the agenda for additional public comments. Anybody that would like to address council?
I made comments on the survey. And it was good to hear all the other comments that maybe do some thinking. One of the things is that I sort of glossed over was all the effort that's been put forth to date. And from my point of view, processes are very important. But I come down as the end result is more important than the process. And I don't want to say anything bad about the process because my question was aimed at the usability of the product. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Any other members of the public wishing to address council? Okay, I have, with the appointment committee information already done, I've got two quick items. First one, we do have an opening on the Civil Service Commission. And I believe when Jeanette gets back tomorrow, she will start getting that information out to the website and to the media. The closing date for applications for that position will be December 23rd. And the other item I have for you is just a reminder of the Christmas parade and tree lighting downtown on Friday, December 9th. I'm hoping the local paper might actually get something in there on the parade and the information that's on the website. We have some information that's outbound from City Hall last week as well on that. But for council that will be in attendance, if you could let me know that, that would be helpful. The parade starts at 6, and then we'll have the tree lighting in Reflection Plaza. We do have now several companies that are coming forward helping on putting that together so that, one, we have no cost to the city, and two, that we have a number of different activities happening downtown. So it'll be a nice little evening, and then the next night, that will also be a preview and bidding night for the Festival of Trees, which will be right across the street in Mr. Hickey's building. And then that event culminates on Saturday evening as well, or Saturday afternoon, I should say. That's all that I've got. Dave, do you have anything additional? Okay. Any items from council? John?
I would like to address just briefly this issue about the strategic planning. There's been, much said revolving around this issue. A couple of things that have come to my attention, and just want to bring them forward just so we can have some good dialogue on this as we move forward on it. The first one is, it's very important that whenever you come up and you speak to the council, or that you have a concern with something a council member said, not to use straw man terminology. Because someone has a criticism or asks questions does not mean they're against citizen input, and it doesn't mean that they are against citizen involvement. It just means they have a different perspective, and they're looking at it from a different side. So it's very important that when we're talking about this issue, to not throw straw men out there that they're this way. It's a complex issue. Strategic planning is complex. And to Mr. Boland's point, we're not going to scrap it. We've invested too much time and too much money into the survey itself. It will be a consideration as we move forward on a strategic plan. And it'll definitely be in high advisement. But there's no way that at this point in this juncture that we can just scrap it and say, be done with it. So hitting on both sides of that issue, I think it's important that we do have dialogue and ask a lot of questions. I think and bring criticism to the table. I think that that's a good thing as well. Thanks.
Rod?
Just that I would like to agree with John on that. I would never support starting this process over and reinventing the wheel all of a sudden, and then along with the expenditure to bring a company in here to do that. So I agree with John. Please come with respect to the council, and we have to give that respect back. But that's a system, that's a process that's in place, and I highly would not support changing or starting over again.
The port is, and I have a few of these for anyone who's interested, an annual event called Deck the Hulls. There's a group of boat owners, they call themselves ships, but they're a little smaller than that, who decorate their boats quite elaborately and tour the greater Portland area, including all the way up the Willamette to the falls, and actually they come here to the port. They will be here on December 3rd, and the show really begins at 7 o'clock. But those in the know, if you want to be inside the port offices where it's warm and out of the wind, you need to get there a lot earlier than 7 o'clock.
Or at the Puffin.
There's also the Puffin, which will be open, and you definitely need to be there, I don't know how early, but I would think before 6 if you want to be at the Puffin. The Puffin is a wonderful little restaurant here in Washougal that does pirate cuisine. I didn't know what that meant, but I lived in the Caribbean for a year, and they do everything from Cuban sandwiches to Jamaican jerk to a crab vindaloo soup that is more Barbadian than anything else. But this is a wonderful event, which I unfortunately will have to miss because of another commitment. I also wanted to mention that on Friday, December 3rd, well, on the 1st of December, I have a Board of Trustees meeting that I need to be at in SeaTac. So I think I will spend the night up there and go to a meeting in Renton, which is called Assess Yourself, Explore Your City's Economic Development Strengths and Weaknesses. And it's about a 3-hour group meeting with some economic development experts. And so I thought I would attend that. And I would invite anyone else on council or staff that wants to do that, we'll figure out a way to make it work. But I'm already going to be up there, so.
Any other items? Michael?
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the comments that were expressed during public comment about my article. And I urge, if anybody questions my support for public comment, I urge them to check the record. I've always supported public comment, and I believe that it's the duty of the council to seek and understand the input of the citizens. I think there might be a misunderstanding about my opinions on the survey itself, though. I am opposed to using vague or misleading survey questions and then taking that as the finger in the wind to determine policy. And if you take, for instance, one question, which I know there are many issues with the survey itself, but the article only is so long, and therefore I chose only 2 questions. And so sticking with one of those 2 questions, an issue that I didn't even mention is the question about the population, future population growth. We know that the options are 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, 35,000, and 40,000. But here's a question for you. Is that 5 years, 10 years from now, 50 years from now? The time horizon is incredibly important to answering that question, and yet it's not given in the survey itself. In addition to that, there's a footnote on that question which influences the respondent potentially. Footnote says something along the lines of, some studies suggest that 2/3 of population growth is from children and grandchildren of existing residents. Now, if we look at that very closely, we'll see that that statement, and if we try to apply it, that means that if the future population growth is, say, 10,000, or the growth is 10,000, 2/3 of that would be from children of citizens. If, however, there were only 100 additional residents in the future, same time horizon, 2/3 of that would be the children of the residents. But either way you apply that, it has absolutely nothing to do with how many that number actually is. It just says 2/3 of whatever that growth is from the children of the residents. So why is that footnote as part of the question? Is it to put the person in the mind frame of saying, well, we need to have 2/3 growth be from our children, and that means that we need to grow the city, or not? It's unclear, and I don't believe it adds anything to the question, but it could confuse the respondent. And putting all of that aside, my biggest concern about the survey is that it might be used as a political tool to advance an agenda. I'm not saying which agenda, but an agenda, as if it were the will of the people, which I don't believe is obvious from the questions that are asked in the survey. And that's why I urge caution for the council against using a biased survey to set public policy. I do appreciate the fact that the council does always have the judgment call in setting policy and in determining the course. The one thing that I would urge caution is claiming that the results of this survey are indicative of anything from the citizens, beyond the fact that 1,200 people answered. But anyway, with that, I yield the floor.
Anything else from council? Okay. With that, we are adjourned.